But Canada can't retaliate and expect to win. It's got to get its house in order. Its fiscal house and its security house, its national security house in order. Danielle Smith, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith gets this. Listen to this.
Sovereignty within United Canada Act was designed to protect our province. The Alberta Sovereignty within United Canada Act was designed to protect our province from unconstitutional interference. And now we're going to use it again.
This is brilliant. This is brilliant. So you can see this. I'll just read a couple of these. Prohibited provincial enforcement or implementation of the federal emissions cap. Protect Alberta oil and gas facilities on essential infrastructure under the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act. Restrict unauthorized entry to oil and gas facilities, including by federal officials or contractors. What this means, folks, is that the oil and gas companies don't have to listen to the federal government because the provincial government has usurped that responsibility, making them free to do their business. This is what Danielle Smith has done. I don't know if everybody is getting this. This is what the Alberta Sovereignty Act enables the province to do, to usurp the interference by the federal government so that companies can still do their business under the law. They won't be violating the law. They can continue to produce the amount of natural gas and oil that the world, the country, and the province needs to create. This is essential to understand. Absolutely.
These actions could include an immediate constitutional challenge in the courts, a ban on provincial bodies enforcing the cap, labeling oil and gas production facilities as essential infrastructure subject to the Alberta Critical Infrastructure Defence Act, prohibiting the entry of all individuals into these facilities except those licensed to enter by the Alberta government, and declaring all information related to greenhouse gases at these facilities to be owned by Alberta's government, with data reported or disclosed at our discretion. This is not a complete list of everything we plan to do, but it's a sign of things to come. It shows how we will respond if the federal government forces us to do so. If the motion passes, we'll act fast to get ready for Ottawa's destructive cap. Albertans expect no less. We'll defend Alberta's prosperity, Alberta's livelihood, and our energy industry.
Should Canada be preparing to retaliate at this point? I know we did that last time when he slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum. We had some success with that policy approach. Do you think the federal government should be readying a tariff war?
Well, look, let's stop the leaky border first. Let's stop the illegal migration first. Let's stop the fentanyl first. Let's meet our NATO commitment first. And let's see.
What she's doing here is reiterating point by point and agreeing with point by point with what Poilievre had just said earlier that day. She's saying we need to seal the border, stop the carbon tax, spend some money on defense, do the things that Trump is highlighting, then we don't need a tariff war. We're not going to need to start a trade war with the United States if we get our fiscal and national security house in order. Danielle Smith understands this. She knows the problem is with Canadian policies. It's not with Donald Trump, it's with Canadian policies. And she gets this.
Where we get with the Americans. I think that the U.S. has legitimate issues that they have raised with us, and we've got to address those legitimate issues. I don't think that we can say, yeah, but, because quite frankly, the American economy is the strongest in the world. They can produce a lot of what they need to consume. We are very reliant on them, and they are in the position of being able to dictate terms. And so I suppose we could punish ourselves with tariffs, but I would say, why don't we take the approach of trying to figure out how to solve the things that are the trade irritants to them? That would be my first step.
During the NAFTA renegotiation, Canada was a united front against Trump's tariffs and threats. It does seem like you and Premier Doug Ford are freelancing a bit this time, coming up with your own policy proposals, maybe suggesting ways to appease Trump in some ways. Is there not a risk that this undermines the Team Canada approach? Shouldn't we all be singing from the same hymn book?
I think Doug Ford and I are aligned. I think we are singing from the same hymn book. And I think we are talking about the things that matter to Canadians. Canadians don't want the fentanyl crisis either. Canadians don't want illegal migration either. Canadians are distressed at how much we've been diminished on the international stage because we're not pulling our weight when it comes to our defense commitments. So I think that the approach that Doug and I have taken in voicing those concerns are actually voicing the concerns of Canadians. And I wish that I would see that the federal government would take those things seriously. You can't keep on going down this path and causing this much harm and not have it have an impact. It's having an impact. And it's going to hurt every single province who relies on a positive trade relationship with the United States. And it is up to the federal government to change gears so that we can address them.
You mentioned the border. You mentioned illegal crossings. We have some stats as well from the Customs and Border Protection folks. 2 million encounters at the Mexican border, 200,000 encounters at the northern border. But I take your point. It has doubled in the last 2 years. It went from about 89,000 to now 200,000 encounters, which is kind of a euphemism for illegal crossings, illegal migrants. What do you want the federal government to do to get that number down? What do you want them to actually implement to try and stop some of these encounters?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, we've asked for in Alberta more 24-hour border crossings working in conjunction with our counterparts. In Alberta, we're bordered entirely by Montana. The Montana governor, Jan Forte, and I wrote a joint letter asking for that so that we could have more border protection and more border observation for longer hours. We need a dedicated border patrol team that may include, since we've got such a long border, maybe it includes some drone technology so that we're able to monitor what is happening, where the sites of entry are. When we apprehend people, we need to send them home. We need to deport them. So I would say that those are the kind of things that we're expected to see. And
it sends a very bad message to cut hours.
I mean, before we get into this one, this is fascinating because, of course, I don't have a lot of time for the Bloc. I've said why, but I find it fascinating that Bloc MPs have been until Poilievre made his very stunning announcement yesterday. One of the few people to stand up and say that the border is so porous, illegals are streaming through, and why isn't the federal government doing anything about it? But one more comment about what Danielle Smith says. It's not Team Canada. Team Canada is Trudeau's Canada. Team Canada is Trudeau's way of evading the problems in Canada. Canada first is what Danielle Smith is talking about here. She is echoing what Pierre Poilievre said. The new phrase for all of us is Canada first. And where have we heard something similar? America first. Look after the interests of your own nation first, and then you can get along with the nation next to you. Because it's in my interest, it's in your interest, it's in Canada's interest, as Danielle Smith just said, to seal the border, to stop fentanyl from coming across the border, from stopping illegals from coming across the border, from having a national defense that's credible so we can at least defend Canada, not Ukraine, defend Canada. And I find what this MP says very interesting.
Border crossings, except for the smugglers. It suggests that the border could be even less watertight than it is today. The message Ottawa should be sending is to deploy resources in support of agents and the RCMP. Tracking smugglers at the longest land border is a game of cat and mouse. And when the cat's away, the mice will play. When Quebec sends the Quebec police to take over border management from the federal government, is it really time to cut back on border services? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, it's the time to support our RCMP and services and border services to work with. We've always done with authorities, with police in Quebec. It's a joint effort between Canada's law enforcement and our U.S. partners, and that's exactly what our government has done since the beginning. We are going to reverse the conservative cuts with respect to the RCMP and border services, and we're going to continue to invest more to ensure that they have the necessary resources to do their important work.
And it goes both ways, because I think what the Americans are...
I have to interject here. It's Dominic LeBlanc, looking as usual like he just got off a three-day bender, trying to say it's Stephen Harper's fault the border's porous. Conservative cuts that the Liberals haven't noticed for 9 years. He said this just before, a couple of days before Poilievre made his stunning announcement yesterday, which I say is probably the best political speech. And I wish I had more of it today to show you. I really wanted, because I was impressed. I thought this was a seasoned, intelligent, focused, articulate, and well thought through response to Justin Trudeau's complete idiocy. Justin Trudeau gave you a word salad. Justin Trudeau gave you, I am so shaken, I can't express myself. Pierre Poilievre thought about what to say, and he said it well.
Observing, and your numbers show it, is that people have been coming to Canada with the purpose of sneaking into the United States. That's why we've gotten the attention of the border czar. Is he's realizing that if they don't stop this, it's going to continue to get worse and worse. And it's up to us to be a good neighbor and to make sure that we continue to have the longest undefended border by doing what we can to prevent that flow.
Yeah. You see, encounters, as the CBC reporter, I can't believe he actually admitted, encounter means illegal crossing. That's another euphemism that these idiots like to use. Idiots meaning the politicians, the CBC, and the people who are supporting illegal immigration. It's an encounter. Look at this increase here. And I tell you, I got one more slide. I got one more to show you at the end of his. That's shocking.
What can he do to smooth things over?
Well, look, I'm going to lead from Alberta's interests. Alberta knows that we are the solution to the American energy security issues, and that is our strongest bargaining point. But we can't be bargaining from that position with things like an emissions cap and a production cap hanging over our heads. We can't be talking about how we're going to remain competitive if tariffs do come in, if he's continuing with a carbon tax that's going to add 61 cents a liter onto gasoline and diesel, and the capital gains tax changes that he's making. We are just going to see a flow of businesses that are leaving from Canada and going into the United States. He needs to understand how serious it is, the policy measures that he's taken, and do a quick reverse on a number of them, meet the Americans in the areas where they are concerned, alleviate those concerns, and then hopefully we can get on to talking about trade issues, because I think that that's what's happening, is the trade issues and the security issues are getting intermingled. We've got to address the security issues before we can have a reasonable discussion about trade.
Very intelligent response. I think she's dead on. Once again, I don't always agree with Danielle Smith. I've known Danielle Smith for 30 years. I think she's 30 years or 20, anyway, decades. She's usually dead on with these issues.
Ho, 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 ho.